It was a sunny Saturday afternoon when I found myself sitting in the back seat of Alex's car, trying to stay out of the way. He had been dating someone new for a few weeks, Chloe, and I didn't know much about her, except that she had a sharp tongue and a strong personality. I had heard small rumors from friends about her being difficult, but I never thought I'd see it firsthand in such a shocking way. We had stopped at a local cafe to grab some drinks, and as we got back into the car, Chloe slid into the front seat, immediately complaining about the space and muttering under her breath. Then I saw it. An elderly woman approached the car, smiling politely, trying to get in the front passenger side. Chloe looked up, narrowed her eyes, and without a single word of greeting, she shoved the woman back and said, "There's no room here for you. Move aside." The woman froze for a moment, taken aback by the rudeness, and stepped back slowly, adjusting her bag. The expression on her face was a mix of confusion and hurt, and I felt my chest tighten. I leaned forward, trying to understand the situation, when something clicked. The woman wasn't a stranger. I knew that face. Those gentle eyes, the slight crease near her mouth, the soft way she carried herself, I recognized her immediately. It was Margaret. My mother-in-law. My Alex's mother. The woman who had quietly supported me in so many ways I couldn't even begin to count. She had always shown me kindness in secret, small notes of encouragement, surprise meals when I was exhausted, advice that helped me through tough days. And here she was, being treated with such blatant disrespect by the person my boyfriend had chosen to be with. I felt a mix of anger and disbelief swirling in my stomach. How could someone be so cruel, so careless with their words and actions? Chloe didn't even pause to see who she was talking to. She didn't know, of course, but that didn't make the act any less hurtful. I could feel the tension rise inside the car. Alex, oblivious as always, was fiddling with the radio, not noticing the cold exchange taking place right in front of him. Margaret took a deep breath, adjusting her scarf, and gave Chloe a calm, polite smile, as if trying to keep the peace. But the hurt in her eyes was impossible to hide. I wanted to say something, to step in and defend her, but I stayed silent for a moment, letting the scene unfold. I knew this moment would not be forgotten, not by me, and certainly not by Margaret. I could feel a shift inside me, a spark of determination. I wasn't sure yet what I would do with it, but I knew one thing for sure: Chloe's arrogance had just set the stage for a reckoning. And I would be ready when the time came. Alex and I had known each other for as long as I could remember. We grew up in the same neighborhood, went to the same schools, and shared countless memories. Over the years, our friendship had grown into something deeper, something I trusted completely. I had never doubted him, never thought he could hurt me intentionally. That trust made the scene in the car even more shocking. Margaret, Alex's mother, had been a quiet presence in my life long before she became part of my family officially. She noticed when I was struggling in college, when bills piled up and stress felt overwhelming. She left little notes, dropped off meals, offered advice without making me feel indebted. She never told Alex about any of it. She didn't need recognition. Her support was subtle, steady, and genuine. That's why seeing Chloe treat her with such disrespect cut me so deeply. Chloe's behavior wasn't just rude, it was deliberate. She thrived on power and control, making sure anyone she saw as less than understood their place. Material possessions, social status, and appearances mattered more to her than kindness or decency. From the way she talked down to waiters, to the sneers at strangers on the street, it was clear she had no interest in being decent unless it benefited her image. It wasn't just the front seat incident. I had started noticing little things before: how she dismissed people quietly behind their backs, how she laughed at small misfortunes that weren't hers to mock. Inside me, a storm of emotions grew. Anger, disbelief, and betrayal mixed together so sharply it was almost physical. How could Alex not see it? How could someone so clearly cruel be accepted into our lives without question? And worse, how had I allowed this situation to become possible? I felt a responsibility to protect Margaret, to make sure she wasn't humiliated or hurt again by Chloe's arrogance. But I also knew that confrontation wasn't the first step. I needed to understand Chloe better, to see her weaknesses, to watch her closely without revealing my intentions. It was like holding a magnifying glass over a fragile structure, waiting for the cracks to appear. The more I observed, the more patterns became obvious: her need for attention, her lack of genuine empathy, the way she reacted defensively when challenged. I started taking mental notes, quiet ones, pretending to be unaware while really noticing everything. I watched her interactions with Alex, with strangers, with her friends. Each word, each gesture, each smirk revealed more about who she truly was. It was painstaking, but I knew that patience would be essential. Chloe's arrogance would eventually become her weakness, and I had to be ready. By the end of that week, I realized I wasn't just angry, I was determined. Determined to protect those I cared about, to show the truth to those blinded by charm, and to make sure Chloe's disrespect didn't go unnoticed or unpunished. It was the beginning of a quiet plan, one that I would carry out carefully, step by step. A few days after the car incident, I decided I couldn't stay quiet any longer. I pulled Alex aside while we were at his apartment, away from Chloe and anyone else. "Alex, I need to talk to you about Chloe," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. I explained what I had seen and how rude she had been, not just to strangers but to people who had helped us both in the past. Alex shook his head and gave a dismissive smile. "Emily, you're overreacting. Chloe's just being herself. She's outspoken, that's all. You're reading too much into it." I stared at him, feeling my frustration rise. How could he not see it? I wanted to shout, to make him understand, but I swallowed my words. He wasn't ready to hear the truth, and yelling would only push him further away. Instead, I let it go for the moment, even though my mind was racing. That evening, Chloe's behavior continued, but now it felt like she was aware of me in a different way. She started making small comments in front of Alex, questions and remarks that were disguised as jokes but carried sharp edges. "Are you still working that same old job, Emily? Must get boring sometimes," she said casually one night, laughing as if it were harmless. Other times, she made offhand comments about my family or my choices, always designed to make me feel small without Alex noticing the full intent. At first, I tried to ignore it, pretending I didn't hear. But inside, a pit of anger was growing. Every word, every laugh, every sideways glance built on my frustration. I could see Chloe was trying to get under my skin, and she seemed to enjoy the little power she had over me in front of Alex. It was worse knowing that Alex didn't see what was happening. He smiled at Chloe's jokes, joined in on the laughter, completely blind to her manipulations. I began to feel isolated, as if I were standing alone while the people I trusted were caught up in Chloe's charm. It was a strange, lonely feeling, watching someone you care about get taken in by someone so clearly unworthy, and realizing you couldn't stop it yet. But even as my anger grew, I reminded myself to stay patient. I couldn't let Chloe think she had me figured out. I needed to hold back, to watch, to gather evidence. Every small insult, every attempt to humiliate me, was a piece of proof of who she really was. I started paying closer attention, noting her reactions, her patterns, and her overconfidence. Deep down, a spark of revenge began to form. I didn't know exactly how it would happen, or when, but I knew Chloe's arrogance would be her weakness. I just had to be smart, careful, and wait for the right moment. For now, I held myself back, learning and observing, preparing for the day when the truth would finally come to light. A week later, I started hearing stories about Chloe from people who had known her before. A coworker of Alex's mentioned that she had a pattern of creating drama in her past relationships. Another friend quietly told me that Chloe had deliberately driven a former boyfriend's family apart just to feel in control. The more I learned, the more pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Everything she had done to me and to Margaret now made sense. I realized that Chloe wasn't just rude or careless, she was calculating. Every insult, every slight, every attempt to make someone feel small was part of a bigger pattern. She seemed to feed off the discomfort she caused, enjoying the sense of power it gave her. I began paying even closer attention, looking for ways to collect proof of her behavior. I took mental notes of every sarcastic comment, every dismissive gesture, and every moment she tried to belittle someone. The incident with Margaret in the car stood out the most. I replayed it in my head, imagining Chloe's smug face and Margaret's polite endurance. That moment alone spoke volumes about her character. I decided to talk to Margaret about it, gently at first. She hadn't known Chloe was dating Alex, and when I explained, she looked surprised but not shocked. She had always known Chloe had a controlling streak. Margaret shared a few small experiences she had had with Chloe in the past, subtle moments of manipulation that at first seemed insignificant but now fit the pattern perfectly. She warned me to stay calm, to avoid confrontation until I had a plan. Her advice was simple but powerful: patience was the key, and Chloe would eventually reveal her true self if left unchecked. Listening to Margaret, I felt a mixture of relief and determination. I wasn't alone, and I wasn't imagining things. Chloe's manipulative nature was real, and now I had the confirmation I needed. But I also knew I couldn't rush. Confronting her too soon would only give her the chance to twist the situation, making me look petty or irrational. The best approach was strategic: gather evidence, observe patterns, and wait for the right moment when her arrogance would naturally create a problem for her. From that point, I began paying attention to the little cracks in her confidence. The way she reacted when someone disagreed with her, the subtle frustration when she wasn't in control, the tiny slips in her carefully crafted image, everything was a clue. I also started documenting things quietly, mentally cataloging them for later. Every interaction, every insult, every attempt to undermine me or others was a piece of the bigger picture. By the end of the week, I felt a strange calm. Chloe's behavior was predictable, and I had a clear sense of how it would eventually backfire. I didn't know exactly when the moment would come, but I knew it was coming. Her own arrogance and need for control would create an opening, and when it did, I would be ready. For now, I waited, observing, learning, and preparing, knowing that the next steps would be crucial. A few weeks later, Chloe decided to host a dinner at Alex's parents' house. She said it was to get closer to the family, but it was obvious she wanted to impress everyone with how perfect she was. I knew this would be her moment to show off, so I quietly made sure Margaret was invited. She needed to be there, not just to witness Chloe's behavior, but to support me in ways only she could. The evening started with polite conversation, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. Chloe moved through the room like she owned it, smiling at some, ignoring others, and always keeping the focus on herself. Then she turned to me. "Emily, still working that same job? I can't imagine spending my evenings doing something so ordinary," she said, her voice sweet but cutting. I could feel the eyes in the room shift, but I stayed calm. I knew reacting angrily would only give Chloe power. Instead, I smiled softly and replied, "It's a job I enjoy, and it keeps me focused." But speaking of focus, I've heard some interesting stories about people who like to control everything around them to feel powerful. Chloe's smile faltered for just a second, and I saw her glance nervously at Alex. I continued, keeping my tone light but deliberate. "It's funny how some people try to impress everyone at once, while the people they try to show off to already know the truth about them. Like the way they treat family and friends when they think no one is watching." Chloe stiffened, and murmurs started in the room. She tried to brush it off with a laugh, but her gestures became sharp, her usual charm cracking under pressure. I didn't need to say names, everyone who knew her past could put the pieces together. Margaret, quietly sitting nearby, gave a subtle nod, her eyes showing both amusement and approval. Chloe's confidence started to crumble. She stumbled over her words, tried to defend herself, and even Alex looked confused for a moment, unsure what I was hinting at. I kept going carefully, mentioning small examples of manipulation I had heard about, without accusing her directly, letting the hints speak louder than my words. The more I spoke, the more obvious it became. Chloe's arrogance had blinded her to the consequences, and now the room was starting to notice. By the end of the dinner, Chloe was visibly flustered. Her carefully crafted image of perfection had begun to break. The charm she relied on to manipulate situations had failed her for the first time in front of a full audience. People exchanged surprised glances, quietly realizing that Chloe's personality wasn't what it seemed. As we left the dinner, I felt a sense of relief and satisfaction. Chloe's public facade had started to crack, and it had been done without confrontation or aggression, just careful observation, subtle exposure, and timing. For the first time, I saw the power of patience and strategy, and I knew this was only the beginning. After the dinner, I focused on strengthening my relationship with Alex in small, quiet ways. I didn't confront him or demand attention. Instead, I let my actions speak. I helped him with tasks without making a show of it, listened when he needed advice, and supported him in ways Chloe never bothered to. Over time, he started noticing my reliability, my calmness, and my ability to handle situations without drama. Slowly, trust and respect began to shift back toward me. Meanwhile, Chloe's behavior started to reveal more of her true nature. It wasn't just small insults anymore. She became aggressive when things didn't go her way and controlling in ways that even Alex began to notice. She criticized how he spent his free time, made demands about minor details in his life, and openly disregarded his opinions when she thought she was right. At first, Alex tried to defend her, but her constant pressure was starting to wear him down. I realized this was my chance to help Alex see the truth without forcing it on him. I began sharing small, factual details about Chloe with his parents, nothing dramatic, just subtle information that would help them see her pattern of behavior. For example, I told them about the incident in the car with Margaret, framed as a concern for how she treated people, and shared a few small stories I had learned about her past manipulations. I didn't exaggerate, I just let the facts speak for themselves. His parents started noticing the inconsistencies too. They asked questions, shared small observations, and quietly expressed concern. Chloe didn't realize what was happening. Her arrogance made her blind to the fact that people were starting to question her motives. She began acting defensive, snapping at small remarks, and trying harder to maintain control, but every effort only revealed more cracks in her behavior. Chloe's paranoia grew without her understanding why. She double-checked her words, watched people more closely, and tried to manipulate situations that were already slipping from her grasp. I stayed calm, observing everything, careful not to rush or provoke her too early. Every reaction she had gave me more insight into her personality and more evidence of her controlling ways. By keeping my focus on Alex, his family, and myself, I created a quiet but effective isolation for Chloe. Her influence weakened without confrontation, and her own behavior was starting to push people away naturally. It was subtle, slow, and completely strategic. I didn't need to force the situation. Chloe was undoing herself through her arrogance, aggression, and obsession with control. The more she tried to hold on to her image, the more obvious her true colors became. Every defensive outburst, every sharp comment, and every attempt to manipulate Alex only gave me more clarity. I realized then that patience, observation, and careful planning were far more powerful than rushing to expose her. Chloe was crumbling on her own, and I was ready to let it happen in the right moment. Over time, Alex started noticing things he had ignored before. Chloe's charm had hidden her cruelty, but it was becoming harder to miss. She mocked his family in subtle ways, making jokes that were funny on the surface but cutting underneath. She took credit for ideas and work that Alex had done, presenting them as if they were hers. Slowly, she even began keeping him away from his friends, suggesting that they didn't understand him or weren't supportive enough. It was painful to watch. I could see Alex struggling, confused about why things didn't feel right, and still hesitant to confront Chloe. That was when I decided to step in, quietly but firmly. I remained calm in every interaction, never raising my voice or making accusations. When Chloe tried to provoke me, I responded with measured words and subtle reminders of fairness and respect. My calmness contrasted sharply with her growing chaos, making her look even more unstable without me needing to attack her. Margaret stayed close, offering subtle guidance and support. She didn't speak loudly or publicly shame Chloe, but she made small remarks in Alex's presence that highlighted my patience and thoughtfulness. For example, when Chloe tried to rewrite a story about an event we all shared, Margaret gently corrected her, emphasizing facts without judgment, letting everyone see Chloe's exaggerations. She also praised my approach to handling difficult situations, making it clear that I was steady and reliable. Chloe began to notice that I wasn't an easy target. Her usual tactics, mocking, belittling, or manipulating, didn't work on me. I didn't react with anger, panic, or jealousy. Instead, I stayed composed, calm, and collected. Every attempt she made to unsettle me failed. She grew frustrated, confused, and increasingly exposed in front of people she wanted to impress. Alex started connecting the dots. He noticed the small ways Chloe undermined him and others, and he began realizing that my calm responses weren't just patience, they were proof of insight and intelligence. He could see that while Chloe thrived on chaos, I created solutions and maintained composure. Slowly, he began questioning why he had ignored her manipulations for so long. Chloe, for the first time, realized she was dealing with someone different. I wasn't like the others she had controlled in the past. I was patient, I observed carefully, and I understood her behavior. Most importantly, I didn't fear her or let her make me react. That realization made her cautious, but it didn't stop her attempts. She was still aggressive and manipulative, but now she knew she couldn't intimidate or control me easily. This was the turning point. Alex's awareness was growing, Chloe's cracks were becoming obvious, and my position, calm, steady, and strategic, was strengthening. Chloe's arrogance was no longer enough to hide her true nature, and I was ready to guide the next steps in exposing her. The balance of power was shifting, and for the first time, Chloe felt uncertain. After weeks of careful observation, I finally had everything I needed. I had gathered clear examples of Chloe's lies and manipulations, both subtle and obvious. She had tried to twist stories to make me look bad in front of Alex and even spread small rumors to mutual friends, hoping to isolate me. Each attempt only added to the evidence I quietly collected, and it was undeniable now, her behavior wasn't accidental, it was deliberate. I knew it was time to confront Alex, but I wanted it to be private and controlled. I asked him to meet me one evening at his apartment, away from Chloe and anyone else. I stayed calm, steady, and direct, presenting the facts one by one. I explained the patterns I had noticed, the attempts she had made to undermine me, and the ways she had tried to manipulate everyone around her, including him. I kept my tone factual, avoiding anger or accusations, letting the proof speak for itself. Alex listened at first in silence, his face shifting from confusion to concern. I could see him processing everything, realizing how blind he had been. When I mentioned Chloe's repeated attempts to distort events and harm my reputation, he began to understand the full scope of her manipulations. I didn't need to embellish or dramatize, the truth was enough. Later, when Chloe tried to spin the story, it fell apart immediately. Her usual confidence was gone, replaced by defensiveness and panic. She tried to argue, claiming misunderstandings and exaggerations, but every lie she told contradicted the evidence I had carefully collected. There was nothing she could do to recover her image. Her manipulations, once hidden behind charm and arrogance, were now completely exposed. Alex's reaction was a mixture of shock and regret. He realized he had almost lost someone truly loyal and supportive because he had been blinded by infatuation. The realization hit him hard, he had trusted the wrong person, allowed Chloe's manipulations to cloud his judgment, and ignored the warning signs. He looked at me with a combination of guilt and relief, finally understanding the patience and intelligence I had shown throughout the ordeal. I didn't gloat or demand apologies from Chloe. The evidence had done all the work. Seeing her flustered and unable to defend herself in front of Alex and the truth I presented was its own reward. The manipulation she had relied on for so long had collapsed, and there was no way for her to regain control. In that moment, I felt a deep sense of relief and empowerment. Chloe's betrayal was fully revealed, and I had handled it with strategy and patience, not anger or rash action. Alex finally understood the truth, and for the first time, he truly appreciated my loyalty and integrity. It was a turning point for all of us. Chloe was exposed, the danger she posed removed, and the foundation of trust and honesty between Alex and me was beginning to rebuild. After the confrontation, Chloe had no choice but to leave. She tried to defend herself at first, but every word she said only made her look worse. Her arrogance and lies had been fully exposed, and there was no way to recover without revealing even more of her manipulations. Slowly, she faded out of Alex's life, humiliated and powerless. For the first time, the person who had caused so much stress and chaos had no control. With Chloe gone, Alex and I finally had the space to talk honestly. We sat down one evening, just the two of us, and shared our thoughts and feelings openly. We discussed trust, the importance of loyalty, and what respect really meant in a relationship. Alex admitted he had been blinded by infatuation and promised to pay more attention to actions rather than appearances in the future. I shared how it felt to be undermined and dismissed, and he listened without judgment, showing genuine understanding. I felt a wave of validation wash over me. The patience, observation, and careful planning I had practiced were finally recognized. I had not only protected myself from Chloe's manipulation but had also safeguarded the dignity and honor of my family, especially Margaret. It was empowering to know that I had handled a difficult, emotional situation with composure and intelligence, rather than letting anger or panic control me. That evening, Margaret came over to check in. We sat together quietly, reflecting on everything that had happened. She didn't need to say much, her eyes conveyed pride and warmth. I thanked her for the subtle guidance and support she had given me throughout the ordeal, and she reminded me that patience and observation often reveal the truth more effectively than confrontation. It was a quiet, heartfelt moment, bridging the gap between generations and creating a deeper bond of understanding. The weight of the past weeks began to lift. Chloe's departure, Alex's realization, and the acknowledgement from Margaret all combined to create a sense of closure. The tension and fear that had followed me since the car incident were gone, replaced with confidence and clarity. I realized that being calm, strategic, and patient had not only exposed Chloe but had also strengthened my own sense of self. For the first time in a long while, I felt free from manipulation and lies. I had maintained my dignity, honored my family, and helped Alex see the truth. The experience had been painful, frustrating, and exhausting, but it had also shown me my own strength. I knew I could handle challenges like this in the future, not with anger or revenge alone, but with patience, intelligence, and quiet determination. It was the kind of closure that doesn't just end a conflict, it teaches a lesson, builds character, and restores trust. And in that moment, I finally felt at peace. Looking back on everything that happened, I realized how much I had learned about betrayal, patience, and strategy. Chloe's actions had been hurtful, and at first, I had felt powerless. But over time, I understood that rushing into confrontation or reacting in anger wouldn't have solved anything. Sometimes, staying quiet, observing carefully, and planning each step can be far more powerful than speaking out immediately. I had learned to trust my instincts and to pay attention to patterns of behavior. Chloe's manipulation, arrogance, and cruelty became obvious only because I took the time to notice and understand them. By remaining calm, I was able to act strategically, turning her own actions into evidence against her. I realized that patience and careful planning can transform a painful, humiliating experience into an opportunity to protect yourself and those you care about. Through this journey, I also understood the value of composure. Anger and frustration might feel satisfying in the moment, but they rarely produce results. By keeping a clear mind, I could make decisions that were smart, deliberate, and effective. Chloe underestimated me because she assumed I would react emotionally like the others she had controlled. Instead, I stayed steady and calm, and that gave me the upper hand. Another lesson was the importance of loyalty and support. Margaret's quiet guidance and the trust one rebuilt with Alex were essential in this process. Having allies who see the truth and can offer subtle guidance can make a huge difference when dealing with someone manipulative. Support doesn't always mean direct confrontation, sometimes it's about giving reassurance, perspective, and wisdom at the right moment. Most importantly, I realized that protecting your dignity is worth more than seeking immediate revenge. Chloe's downfall wasn't about me humiliating her, it was about letting her actions speak for themselves while I maintained my integrity. When people act wrongly, their own behavior often exposes them more effectively than any argument or accusation ever could. To anyone listening to my story, I want you to reflect on your own experiences. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted? How did you respond? And more importantly, how far would you go to protect your dignity without losing yourself in the process? Sometimes, the most powerful actions are quiet, patient, and strategic. This experience taught me that life often tests your patience and intelligence. You can face betrayal, manipulation, and dishonesty, and still come out stronger if you plan carefully, stay composed, and trust yourself. Your strength isn't just in confrontation, it's in the quiet moments of observation, the small decisions that build a clear path, and the courage to stay true to your values even when others try to bring you down. In the end, Chloe's actions taught me a lesson I will never forget: patience, strategy, and composure can turn even the most painful betrayal into a story of personal triumph. And that is the power of keeping your dignity intact, no matter the storm around you.